At the start of the year, I took a recommendation from a friend to visit the city of Girona. Work would take me to Barcelona, and as usual, I wanted to make the most out of the travel by flying in early. Girona has its own airport, so I could fly directly there for the weekend, then take a short train ride on the Monday to get me into Barcelona after, ready to attend the ISE conference. Despite being so close to Barca, Girona has a completely different vibe all of its own, and a large part of that is due to the medieval old town. Barcelona is often characterised by the architecture of Gaudi, but Girona has a far older feel to it, as much of the walled city remains intact and gives the place a very historic atmosphere. This also made it a choice location to film a number of scenes for season 6 of Game of Thrones, with the cathedral steps standing in for those to the Sept of Baelor, many of the winding side streets being used for Arya's battle with the Waif in Bravos, and the monastery of Pere de Gilligants used as the citadel in Old Town. My favourite bit of trivia though is that one of the ice cream stores created an exclusive ice lolly in homage to the series, recreating Jaime Lannister's golden hand in a delicious mango and blood orange flavour. My first landmark to visit, however, was a little more modern than the medieval city. Girona is also home to the Eiffel Bridge. That's right, a sister construction to Paris's most iconic landmark, the Eiffel Bridge. The Eiffel Bridge is almost exactly what you would expect, a massive iron girder. The old town side of Girona borders directly onto the river, with a number of bridges jutting directly out from among the buildings, which makes Gustave Eiffel's bridge even more unusual as it stands out in contrast to most of its surroundings. In terms of photography, for this trip I brought with me the Pentax SP1000, loaded with the remains of a roll of Kodak Pro Image 100. On my first day of exploring, the camera caught the attention of a local street photographer, and we stopped to have a chat using a mix of basic Spanish, English, and Google Translate. He asked me to take my photo and shared the pics. You can find him over on Instagram at Josep Burset. To get a flavour for a local perspective of Girona's street life, head over to Instagram and check out his profile. The reason I had initially stopped was a shop that caught my eye. Girona has a big cycle culture, with many athletes basing themselves here for the conditions and routes. I was passing by the Trek shop, which really caught my eye because of the striking conversion of the ground floor from a brutalist style building to house many of the brand's bikes. The store also had this great area showcasing different route recommendations of varying difficulty, and also this unique Y bike. These were created from a commission to the White House, and they could be used by the US President's security staff to patrol the grounds. Back on the streets, I headed to my main destination, a unique museum that was an absolute perfect spot for a cinephile and camera nerd like me, the Thomas Malol collection. The museum features one of Europe's biggest collections of pre-cinema artifacts, illustrating the technologies that paved the way for modern-day motion picture capture and exhibition as we know it. Among the collection were stunning magic lantern slides, camera obscuras, and vintage cinema cameras of all varieties. What really struck me tracing the evolution of these technologies through the collection was how rare it was prior to the 20th century for people to encounter images. Everyday people didn't have access to the means of creating or showing images like we do today. Travelling exhibitions were put on shows to entertain and educate with their collections, but were met with reactions that range from astonishment to accusations of witchcraft. These technologies allowed people to encounter new ways of seeing distant and imagined places they never would have been able to see otherwise. The museum itself was located pretty centrally in the city, just off Plaza Santa Susana and Plaza de la Constitución. I apologise for my pronunciation throughout this video, but I'm just going to try and do my best. On this more contemporary side of town, the train tracks run over the city with a cycle path underneath. This is full of street art and also serves as one of the main arteries of the city I used to navigate. For the weekend, I stayed south of the main station in a hostel called Can Cocolona. I chose this as it had a really relaxed vibe in the pictures, low-key communal areas and pets. Small and simple, but for me that's all I need when I'm going to be out in a new city exploring. I would definitely recommend this hostel, though if you expect to be visiting the city centre and Old Town a lot, there are closer places you could stay, as the hostel is southwest of the central station, while most of the landmarks are northeast, so I definitely clocked up a meaty step count. For Friday to Monday, booked via booking.com for 3 nights, this cost me £72 or €84 at the time for a non-refundable booking. On Sunday I took to the city walls. At this point I'd finished my first roll of film, so switched things up a little by loading in some Portrait 160. I've shot with this and Pro Image 100 before, but I was keen to have some comparable images of these two stocks in similar conditions to compare. Having conquered the city walls, I decided to commit to a far more distant viewpoint, hiking to Castel de Sant Miquel, roughly a 3.5-hour round trip. I love a castle, and its location promised 360-degree views of Girona, the Emporda Plain, Govares Massif, and the valleys of the Onyar and Ter rivers. Apologies again for my pronunciations here. Sadly, technical issues with my camera really held back the photos I took during this hike. The Pentax has a laggy shutter which leaves pictures unexposed at random. The thing is, I got this camera for only £25, and this lagging shutter issue is inconsistent assistant. Out of a roll of 36 pictures, I can usually guarantee about 3 to 6 photos will be ruined by this issue, but it's not quite enough for me to sack it off altogether and stop using the camera. But nonetheless, the hike was a worthwhile outing, as you can see from my excitement upon reaching the summit. I looped back using a different route through the Montjuic area, not to be confused with the similarly named area in Barcelona. This was an elevated area that looked back over Girona town, so again provided some excellent views as I came back into town at sunset. Afterwards, I got an early night so I could fit in a run the next morning along the River Ter before catching the train to Barcelona. I hope you enjoyed coming along with me for this brief trip to Girona. I've dropped links to many of the sites I referenced in this video to help if you're planning a visit for yourself. I'm excited to revisit in the future and see the surrounding Costa del Mar and rent bikes to get out on the road in the landscape surrounding the city. If you enjoyed this video, drop me a like and subscribe if you're not already. I'll be uploading more travel vlogs like this featuring film photography and other adventures. I'm just starting out with this video format, so if you've watched this far, leave me a comment with some feedback on what you thought worked well and what didn't. See you in the next one.